Welcome to the deep dive. We sort through all the latest research, the articles, expert takes to bring you what really matters. Today, we're diving into the world of electric vehicles in 2025. It's fascinating and honestly often pretty surprising. Okay, let's get into this. The main theme, really, is the global EV revolution. It's definitely accelerating, no doubt about that, but it's moving at such different speeds depending on where you look. And 2025, yeah, it's shaping up to be a really pivotal year, special China. So for this deep dive, we've pulled together insights from, well, quite a few places. The big Bloomberg 2025 EV Outlook, Clean Technica Analyses, Real Talk from Reddit's electric vehicles, stuff from TechWire Asia, the German entrepreneur, visual capitalist, DriveK, and the China EV data tracker, too. Our mission, pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the most important stuff, the facts that make you go, huh, and, the deeper meaning behind it all, just to give you a really clear, informed picture of where the EV market actually is right now. So let's jump right in.
Okay, globally, the big headline is pretty significant. Plug-in EVs.
There's set to be about 1 in 4 new passenger cars sold worldwide this year. That's around 22 million units, give or take, which is, a 25% jump from 2024? Solid growth. But here's something even more interesting, I think. Other types of vehicles electrifying even faster. We're talking buses, 43% electric, and two-wheelers hitting 45% electric. So the overall shift is really happening.
What's truly fascinating, though, is that while that global number sounds big, it's really not uniform at all. If you zoom in, the biggest story, the single most significant thing in 2025 is definitely China's historic shift. We've seen the data from the first half of this year. New energy vehicles, NEVs, they call them, so that's battery electrics and plug-in hybrids combined. They actually outsold traditional gas and diesel cars, ICE vehicles, in China. For the first time ever, they hit 50.1% market share, 50.1. I mean, put that in perspective. China's basically blown past its own 2035 target for EV adoption. Years ahead, maybe even a decade. It's quite the leap.
Wow, 50% already. That's huge, way past their own goals. So, okay, if China's that far ahead, particularly on market share, what's the secret sauce? You might think it's just, sheer manufacturing muscle, but you mentioned affordability. Is that the key? How'd they manage that?
You nailed it. That's the core insight, and it really changes the game. China is, right now, the only major market globally where, on average, EVs are actually cheaper to buy than a similar combustion car. And we're not talking a tiny difference. The average battery EV in China, around $25,465. That's about 3% less than the average gas car, which is $26,163. This isn't just nudging market share, you see. It's fundamentally changing the calculation for buyers by making the EV the smarter money choice right off the bat.
Cheaper upfront, not just over the lifetime, but right at the point of sale. That's genuinely amazing. So this affordability, it didn't just happen by magic. What's driving it? What are the mechanics behind that?
Exactly right. No magic involved. It's really the result of years of deliberate industrial policy, immense scale in manufacturing, obviously, and just incredibly fierce competition domestically. You've seen automakers like BYD kicking off major price wars, just slashing prices on models. A huge piece of this puzzle is the widespread use of LFP batteries, lithium iron phosphate. They're just inherently cheaper to make than the nickel-based ones often used in the West. And yeah, you can't forget the government incentives. Things like trade-in programs giving subsidies like over $2,800, plus making it way easier to get license plates for NEVs in those big crowded cities. It all adds up to a really strong economic pull.
All right, let's try and wrap our heads around the scale here. Some of these numbers are just wild. BYD, for instance, delivered nearly 4.3 million EVs in 2024. That means they jumped over established players to become China's biggest automaker, full stop. And it's not just the established giants. Even a tech company jumping in, like Xiaomi, already delivered over 130,000 of their first ever EV model last year. This isn't just fast growth. It feels like a totally different speed setting for the market. Projections are now saying China might sell more EVs in 2026 than the U.S. sells total cars, all types. Just think about that. This kind of thing must be hitting foreign brands hard in China, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's created an extremely tough environment for foreign brands.
Yep.
No question. Their market share in China has just plummeted. It was, 64% back in 2020. Now it's down to 37% in 2024. And that's already leading to big financial write-downs for the international players. GM, for instance, they've booked a $5 billion reduction in their China business value. And VW, they're looking at potential write-downs up to $20 billion, mostly through their Porsche holding. So the insight here isn't just about EV adoption numbers. It's about China fundamentally changing the global auto power balance.
Okay, so that's China accelerating dominance, EVs becoming the smart buy, a bullet train, basically. But if China's the bullet train, you'd kind of expect the US and Europe to be maybe on a fast regional train right behind. What we're actually seeing, though, is, well, it's a lot messier, more fractured. Let's pivot to the West. The journey looks really different there. Why are EV prices still so high in the US and Europe when China's cracked the code?
It is a stark contrast, yeah. While China's pushing prices down, you look at Germany. The average battery EV costs $63,837. That's a huge 34% premium over a similar gas car, which averages around $47,558. And in the US, it's a similar story, a 31% price gap. Average BEVs at $60,465 versus gas cars at $46,395. I think the key takeaway here is until that premium shrinks or disappears entirely, EV adoption is just going to be a tougher sell for the average person in these regions.
And it's not just the sticker price anymore, is it? We keep hearing about the cost of public charging going up. So what does that actually mean for you if you're thinking about an EV over there, trying to weigh the costs and benefits?
That's a really critical point now. This price gap issue is getting worse because of this other problem, the rising cost of public charging. Public fast charging prices, both in the US and Europe, they've jumped sharply since 2022, to the point where it often costs the same or sometimes even more than gasoline per mile driven. That just eats away at one of the main financial reasons people considered buying a pricier EV to begin with. Sure, charging at home is still generally cheaper, maybe 25–60% less than gas, but needing a home charger, well, that's a big hurdle for lots of people. Renters, people without driveways, it just changes the whole calculation.
Yeah, definitely complicates things. And talking about complications, there look like some pretty serious storm clouds gathering over the U.S. market specifically. Bloomberg just slashed its U.S. EV sales forecast for 2030, like cut it almost in half, from nearly 50% of new sales down to about 27%. That's a huge drop, roughly 14 million fewer EVs than they previously expected. What's causing such a dramatic rethink?
The profound insight from that Bloomberg revision isn't just a lower number. It's a clear warning, really. It shows how quickly policy changes can flip the script, even on confident forecasts. Turns expected growth into a real uphill climb for the West. The reasons. They're multifaceted, mostly politics and cuts to EV support. A big one is the U.S. Senate voting back in May to revoke California's waiver, the thing that lets California set its own stricter emissions rules. Now, California is fighting that in court, but if they lose, that could have, well, dire consequences for U.S. EV sales nationwide. California just has such a massive influence on the whole market. Take away their mandates, combine that with fewer incentives, EV sales would likely drop sharply across the board. Plus, we're seeing these tariffs described as bizarre on aluminum, steel, lots of stuff in the auto supply chain. John Bozzella from the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, who's pretty blunt, says these extra tariffs, they just mean higher costs for consumers, lower sales, and fewer U.S. auto exports. It's a tangled mess.
Right. These protectionist steps aren't just a U.S. issue, though. Across the pond, Europe seems to be dealing with its own set of problems. And the progress seems so uneven, inconsistent. You look at the projected 2025 EV market shares, UK maybe 35%, France 30%, Germany only 20–25%, and Italy way behind, just 10%. That kind of fragmentation must make planning a nightmare for car companies.
Oh, it's a massive headache for them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Imagine being a global automaker trying to figure out production volumes, where to put your resources, how to manage supply chains, when you've got this patchwork quilt of different rules, different adoption rates, different consumer tastes across one continent. This inconsistency makes long-term planning incredibly tough, and it really holds back the economies of scale you need to bring costs down. That lack of a single unified European approach definitely contributes to this fragmented picture, creating inefficiencies that, ultimately hit the consumer.
Okay, let's connect this to the bigger picture again, looking at batteries. This seems crucial. By the end of this year, 2025, global battery production capacity is expected to hit something like 3.8 terawatt hours, but expected demand only about 1.5 terawatt hours. So we're looking at this huge overcapacity. And significantly, most of that excess capacity is sitting in China. What does that imbalance mean globally?
It's a really interesting global paradox, actually. On one side, yeah, the oversupply has a direct benefit, at least in some places. It's a huge reason why battery prices in China have dropped below that magic $100 per kilowatt hour mark, which, as we said, makes their affordable EVs possible. It's a massive competitive advantage for them. But it's a totally different situation elsewhere. Battery prices are still higher in Europe and the US, and forecasts only show moderate price drops globally in the next few years. It's nothing like that big 20% drop we saw just last year in 2024.
Yeah.
So the insight is, battery overcapacity doesn't automatically mean cheaper EVs for everyone. The benefits are very regional, mainly helping China right now.
Yeah, that really underscores China's strategic grip on the battery sector. It's not just building factories, is it? They control, what, over 75% of the entire battery value chain, from the basic cells right through to the critical bits inside. And we're also seeing a really big shift in the actual battery chemistry they're using.
Absolutely. LFP, lithium iron phosphate batteries. They are basically king now. In China, they accounted for over 81.4% of installed capacity in the first half of 2025. That's a massive 73% jump year over year. Meanwhile, the other main type, NMC, nickel manganese cobalt, actually declined by about 11% to just an 18.5% share. The trend is unmistakable. LFP is cheaper, its performance is getting better all the time. It's just the go-to choice, especially in China. It's mainly a cost thing, but the performance gap is close enough that for most drivers, the savings outweigh any minor trade-offs.
And looking even further ahead, the next generation of batteries, solid state. China seems to be leading there too. These promise better safety, higher energy density, basically more range without adding weight. That's kind of the holy grail for EVs, right? Okay, stepping back from pure battery cars for a sec. Any other interesting shifts happening in the wider EV market?
Yeah, there are a couple of other developments worth noting. Range extended EVs, so those are basically plug-in hybrids where a small gas engine just acts as a generator for the battery. They saw huge growth in 2024, like 83%. Most of that growth was in China's rural areas, actually, where charging points are still few and far between. They offer a kind of practical bridge, peace of mind. On the flip side, hydrogen fuel cell cars, their sales dropped again for the third year running. They're really struggling to get any real traction despite a lot of investment and political backing in some places. It just suggests that while hydrogen might have potential down the road, the infrastructure and cost hurdles are proving much, much harder to overcome compared to battery EVs.
Right. Now, let's talk about the flip side of China's success again, those booming NEV exports. Over 1 million units shipped out in the first half of 2025 alone, up nearly 75% year over year. Mostly Tesla and BYD driving that. That sounds like a flood of Chinese EVs heading for global shores. But what about those tariff walls going up?
You're right, that outward flow is definitely facing potential disruption big time. We're looking at possible EU tariffs that could go over 30%, and the U.S. is considering measures too. These tariffs would absolutely force Chinese manufacturers to rethink their strategies. It creates this whole new geopolitical dimension to the car industry.
And are they rethinking? What are the Chinese companies actually doing to get around these potential barriers and keep their global plans on track?
Oh, they're definitely adapting. It's like watching a strategic chess game play out.
Hmm.
Chinese automakers are already rolling out counter strategies, like building factories directly in Europe. You've got BYD setting up in Hungary, Chery looking at Spain, Leapmotor tying up with Stellantis. They're also pushing hard into other markets, Southeast Asia, Latin America, places where the barriers might be lower, kind of hedging their bets, and of course just keeping up that intense price competition wherever they operate. There's even this funny little twist. Chinese combustion engine car exports to Europe might actually increase, simply because the standard tariffs on those are only 10%, way lower than the potential EV tariffs. It just shows how agile they are.
Okay, so let's try and pull all these different threads together. What does all this really mean for the global car industry as a whole? And, for you listening to this, watching this huge transformation unfold.
I think the core strategic problem, the real dilemma for the traditional, established global automakers is huge. They're stuck having to develop and sell both competitive ICE cars and competitive EVs side by side for years to come. That means essentially double the cost, double the complexity in R&D, manufacturing, marketing, everything. And that's a massive competitive disadvantage compared to Chinese companies who can increasingly just focus everything on EVs, streamline everything, this dual burden. It's probably not sustainable long term. It's forcing a real shakeup.
And even with all these regional differences, we've talked about China just rocketing ahead, Europe kind of stumbling along, the US maybe even hitting reverse in some ways. The really big picture trend seems absolutely clear, doesn't it? EV market share keeps growing. ICE share keeps shrinking. It seems inevitable. In fact, the total number of ICE cars on the road globally, that's projected to peak around 2027, maybe 2028, and then start its final decline. So yeah, it really isn't a question of if we get to full electrification anymore. It's just when.
Precisely. The fundamental challenge now for the global auto industry isn't just about whether to electrify. It's about how to effectively manage these incredibly different speeds of change, different adoption rates, different regulations, different consumer demands, all happening at once across the globe. It demands an unbelievable amount of flexibility, foresight, and frankly, agility to navigate this messy, uneven transition period. It's a puzzle on a grand scale.
Right. And maybe as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to chew on. Think about how these really different paths, China's surge driven by making EVs the cheap option, the West grappling with high costs and policy U-turns, the whole battery tech race. How will all that fundamentally reshape not just the cars in our driveways, but entire economies, geopolitical clout? Who leads in technology over the next decade? And ultimately, what role will simple affordability play in deciding who actually wins this global EV race? And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the 2025 electric vehicle outlook. We've covered China's incredible growth, the complex picture in Western markets, and that whole intricate world of battery tech driving it all. We really hope this discussion has given you a clearer, maybe more nuanced view of where the global EV shift stands right now and perhaps what to keep an eye on next. Thanks so much for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, keep learning and keep asking those big questions.